Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for taking a few moments to join us for today's presentation about the latest updates to our digital technology vendor map. This is always a fun topic for us as we get to walk you through some of the trends that we've been seeing over the past few months and share some insight on what that means for you as an enterprise technology user or buyer. Before we get started, I do want to just let you know that as an attendee at this session, you will have access to these slides within the next couple of days. And for the subscribers I see on the line, you'll be able to access a recording of this presentation in your library at any time. So to kick things off, I do want to share some background about Real Story Group, as I do see a number of new faces here, new names here within the GoToWebinar. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Scott Dill with the business development team here, and my colleague Jared Gingras will be on the line momentarily. And to give a little bit of background about Real Story Group, we're an analyst firm, and we publish detailed research in 9 different technology sectors that are all focused on helping you find the right solution for what it is you're trying to do. So the most common way we engage with our customers is through subscriptions, and that can be a self-service model where you access the research and tools to create customized shortlists and compare the vendors side by side. But also we will have a select number of advisory customers as well, where we'll spend some time you'll spend some time with our analysts to get an idea of which vendors are the right fit for you, do a deep dive on industry trends and how they could affect you, along with whatever topics are most important for your team. We also have a tool called RealScore, where you can measure your digital effectiveness and then benchmark yourselves against your industry peers. And that's something that's also included as part of our Plus subscription. And finally, we do have a select number of consulting engagements throughout the year where we can actually come on site, be an extension of your teams to either help you through a technology selection process or through a strategic roadmap type of engagement. As I mentioned, we're an analyst firm, but we're unique in the industry in that we don't do any work for the vendors that we cover. So we don't speak at their conferences or write white papers for them or advise them on their strategy. Our only focus is on helping you to really figure out which products are the right fit for what you're trying to do. And we want to make sure that we give you as unbiased a view as you can get out there in the marketplace. So what we're going to focus on today is, as we mentioned, our latest digital technology vendor map. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to our managing director, Jared Gingras, to take you through the heart of today's presentation. Jared?
Great. Thanks, Scott. And thank you all for taking some time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We do appreciate it. I think it's great that there's so many of you on the line today and expressing some interest in our vendor map. We've been producing this map now for, I think, going on somewhere close to 10 years. And we did this as kind of a fun way to show the world that we live in, all these different marketplaces represented by individual subway lines with some hubs in the middle, if you will. And, we did it as kind of a fun exercise to kind of get our heads around this world. But it's been so fun to when we walk into consulting clients and see this map pinned up in people's cubicles or offices, and we've seen some folks blow it up into poster size in their war rooms or in their offices, and that's been really fun to see. So it's kind of taken on a life of its own over the years, and as such, we continue to update it with regularity, and definitely a couple times a year. So this is hot off the presses, our latest 2018 or latter half of 2018 going into 2019 digital workplace and marketing technology vendor map. So you can certainly download a high-res copy of your own on the website if you go to realstorygroup.com/vendor map if you haven't done that already. So let's get into what we can learn about this version of the map. As I mentioned, each of the subway lines, if you will, represents one of the areas that we cover in quite depth. If there's 2 big buckets of coverage, we are constantly looking at things that we call digital marketing technologies. So that can also be referred to as MarTech, but things like web content and experience management, CRM or customer relationship management technologies, CDPs or customer data platforms, DAM or digital asset management, and marketing automation and campaign management. So those 5 really make up what we call our MarTech coverage. And then the other side of the house is really the more internally focused content-based technologies. So what we call our digital workplace technologies, or sometimes we even call it our MPEX technologies, which is employee experience based technologies. And when we talk about more of the internally focused systems, we're talking about enterprise collaboration tools and social software, or maybe you are talking about enterprise portals or ECM and document management and cloud file sharing, and of course the big one at the top of many people's minds, Office 365 and SharePoint. So looking at the map, let's first start by talking about what's the same as previous versions of the map and what's new. So there's definitely some continuity from last year's map, and I don't think this is going to change too rapidly, but there's some important lessons and things to take away here. There's definitely a difference between the vendors that appear at the center of this map and those that appear in the periphery. If you look at the map, you'll see some of the biggest names in software development at the center, the hubs, if you will. And those vendors appear as hubs because they're really trying to offer you solutions in all of these different areas that we cover. And if not all of the marketplaces flow through their hubs, certainly many of them do. So what ends up arising is, as a buyer, you have choices between these suites of products from these large software vendors, or you have choices to go out into the periphery of these individual marketplace lines and look at more of the best of breed players in these spaces. There's also out in the periphery, you'll see a lot of the most interesting development and happening, and maybe a lot of the newest enhancements and newest offerings happening in the periphery, whereas the old guard tends to move towards the middle. There's also this notion of platforms versus products, which we'll talk about more. And as you move out to the periphery, you'll see that many of these vendors were born cloud. They're definitely cloud native, and as opposed to some of the old guard that has had to move their traditionally installed versions of their offering and migrate them into a now cloud-enabled solution. So I'm sure many of you have lived through that transition and understand the pains and gains that came with that transition. But there's some big differences between the smaller vendors and sort of the stalwarts in the middle. There's also this notion of fragmentation. If there's one thing that this map certainly shows, it's that as a buyer, you have a lot of options. I think by last count, we're showing about 113 different vendors represented on this map, but those 113 different vendors are producing 150 of the most significant products in the marketplace that we have chosen to follow and evaluate them on an ongoing basis. And again, this kind of fragmentation is not a bad thing. For you as a buyer, it can be confusing at times, but choice is always good. If there was just one solution, we'd all have to go the same direction. And if there's something we've learned over the 18 years that we've been doing this, is that software, either MarTech software or MPEG software, is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So having choice is definitely a good thing. There remains a lot of regional differences among these vendors. Software vendors that have a pretty strong foothold in North America might not have the same foothold in Europe or otherwise, and vice versa. There's also a substantial model variation when it comes to licensing. Pricing models remain completely varied from project to project and vendor to vendor. How they do their implementations and provide service to you very much varies from vendor to vendor, whether it's from internal professional services to third parties to a combination of both of those things. The hosting model, as I mentioned earlier, varies quite a bit. Whether it's installed on premise or in the cloud, whether things are multi-tenant software as a service or single tenant hosted solutions. There's a whole slew of variety of options here. And these are certainly not all of the same complexity and providing the same amount of services to you. There's a pretty wide gap between vendors that call themselves the same thing in a similar marketplace. There can be a huge gap between complexity and simple point solutions. And finally, there continues to be quite a bit of market boundary overlap. Again, this isn't inherently a bad thing, but you need to be careful here, because what we're seeing is a number of vendors that we classify as one particular marketplace are trying to provide solutions in other marketplaces. So for example, we see a lot of web content management vendors saying, hey, we can provide your digital asset management services as well, because we can handle some of those same concerns. Likewise, we see CRM vendors trying to be your CDP vendor, or your CDP vendor trying to be your CRM vendor, or your collaboration tool trying to be your document management tool, your document management tool trying to be your collaboration tool. These things are happening and continue to happen as all these vendors are trying to carve out a bigger slice of the pie of your business and the systems that you work with on a day-to-day basis. So I wanted to go back and really highlight one of those themes that continues to be relevant today. And this is one, if anything, I think there continues to be a widening shift on this spectrum of product versus platform. And this is something that is true in every single software marketplace. There's this notion of platforms that are really flexible, right? Almost like that, when you buy a platform, you're almost getting like that kit of Legos that you can build it into anything that you want, versus a pre-built car or toy or something that is custom built for a particular purpose, right? So there's some with a product, there's faster uptime and it just works today for most business users, but there might be less extensibility and less customization available. So you need to really assess what you have the appetite for in your organization, whether or not you want that, you have the capabilities in-house to handle that box of Legos, or do you need to have something more productized that just meets a particular need? Something to definitely think about, because on Snap, there's a wide range of products that fall into both those categories. So let's look more ahead into what we're seeing in H2 of 2018 as we get to the latter parts of 2018 and into 2019. One big theme that we've seen when it comes to the MarTech side of the house is that people, or the most sophisticated organizations, are starting to get smarter about where their content and data actually lives in their marketing stacks. So as this period of experimentation has kind of evolved over the last few years, what we've seen is more and more content and data are finding their way into various channel-specific repositories. So for example, we see a lot of web content being housed in web content management systems, and email content solely being housed in marketing automation systems, and social content being solely housed in social engagement systems. And that's okay, and for many organizations that's been fine, a fine solution. But as organizations mature and start to think about providing a true omni-channel experience for their constituents, providing a consistent experience across multiple channels or every channel, what people have realized is we need to move our content and data lower in our stacks so that they become foundational elements that I can pull from when I'm creating experiences for my people. So what we found is data is being separated from your content and engagement management services and housed in things like CDPs, where you're able to have that single record of your single 360 view of your desired person that you're trying to reach. We're seeing logic in the form of journeys being constructed in orchestration tools that are independent of your content and engagement management services. We're seeing analytics pulled out, and we're seeing content pulled out in many ways, and content pulled out of these services so that when it comes time for creating an email or creating a website or creating a mobile application or creating a kiosk or creating a print or commercial, you're able to pull from a single source of truth that isn't embedded in a single channel. It's pulling from a repository that is truly prepared to power this omni-channel experience. So what happens there is it allows you to get thinner in your channels and build up a richer repository at the foundation of your marketing technology stack. So this is something that we've been following quite a bit. Everyone's on a different stage in their journey here, but you can expect to see a lot more from us on this concept in the years coming. If that's one view of the externally focused marketing technology, let's take a moment and look at the employee experience side of the house, as it relates to the digital workplace. And one key theme here is that Office 365 continues to run roughshod over incumbent collaboration platforms. We see it almost on a daily basis where organizations tell us that we're just going to replace everything with Office 365. And that can bring some benefits, certainly. There's a tendency to reduce license costs, but we've also heard some of our subscribers say or tell us about the pain points that are associated with this conversion. Losing key knowledge management capabilities and community services that really worked well within organizations has been frustrating, to say the least. And when we see people actually go through a full, true evaluation, who do real bake-offs, we find that the incumbents, things that are very much point solutions like Slack tend to win out over the behemoths like an Office 365. Not in every case, but in most cases. And so we will caution our subscribers certainly to be careful about outsourcing your entire employee user experience to Microsoft, because that's in essence what you're doing. But inevitably, you'll see more vendors come on the scene to supplement that experience and to bolster that experience in certain areas. So if you're on this train, if you're seeing this train rumbling through your digital workplace, you should know that there's options in this ecosystem that you need to be aware of as well that are coming quite quickly. So let's touch on a few of the key marketplaces that find their way onto the map, and talk about some trends we're seeing in each of these marketplaces. So let's hit on web content management, digital asset management, customer data platforms, and the social collaboration space. So for web content management, this is an area that really is still seeing that fragmentation and specialization happen. This has been happening for the last near 20 years, I'd say, and but there's been some consolidation, but if anything, we see more and more entrants to this marketplace. One interesting thing of note here is, unlike some of the other areas that we cover, the big four, if you will, the IBMs, Oracles, Microsoft, Salesforces of the world, they don't have a great solution when it comes to web content management. And in most cases, we're seeing buyers go out to the periphery here. But those vendors in the periphery, particularly some of the stalwarts of this industry, the vendors that have been around for quite some time, they're being challenged. Especially the high-end tools are being challenged by some contenders, and that makes for some interesting competitive web content management selection projects. Whereas companies in the past have always thought it was safe to go with, we just make a decision, just bring on Adobe because we can't go wrong with Adobe or Drupal or Sitecore. There's challengers that are really rising up, and at a much oftentimes much more cost-effective manner. They're saying, hey, give us a look, and in many cases they're unseating incumbents, or at least really making decisions difficult for people to bring new web content management solutions on. Next, let's look at DAM, digital asset management. And here we've seen a few acquisitions. So some acquisitions that we think will lead to those vendors' demise and just disappearance as the buyer gobbles them up and takes their subscriber base and into their own coffers. But we've also seen some vendor entrants in the marketplace, some real interesting new players that are really pushing some incumbent vendors in many ways. But this is one of those areas that I wanted to highlight as there's a lot of vendors that call themselves DAM vendors, and the gap between the most complex and the simpler offerings is really wider than ever. These DAM vendors are really maturing to a point where they want to be your foundational single source of truth for assets, powering all of your marketing stack. And some vendors are really doing a good job at that. Others are really specializing on certain things, like being that basic brand repository for a highly regulated organization. That's just one particular example of increased specialization. But there's a huge range there that you need to be aware of. And just because someone calls themselves a DAM, there's a huge capability spectrum that you need to be aware of. There's certainly a lingering immaturity around vendor intangibles when it comes to the DAM space, and there hasn't been the same community strength developed that we've seen in some of the other marketplaces like web content management. So that's something to be aware of as well. But here's our logo landscape when it comes to the DAM world. And again, if I could draw a line through this and say it's going to be an imperfect line, but there's a huge gap between the vendors on the left side and the vendors on the right side. So if this gap puts more pressure on you as potential buyers than ever to identify what's really most important to you and self-identify with which scenarios it is that you're trying to solve. And we've broken it down to 13 canonical scenarios when it comes to digital asset management, broken into 5 different categories here. And what we found is if you can self-identify with which scenarios are most important to you, go find the vendors that were fundamentally built to solve those scenarios. And that's how you should find your short list. Don't just take their word for it that they're a one-size-fits-all shop for your asset needs. Next, let's talk about customer data platforms, CDPs, if you will. This is our newest research area. We just published this research a few months back now. But the goal of CDPs, for those of you new to this area, is really to help organizations unify, validate, aggregate, segment, and activate their gold customer records. So in a perfect world, you have a 360-degree view of everything related to a customer's record. And then you're able to take that data and activate on it and do something with it and message them appropriately in a variety of different channels. And if there's some themes that we're seeing in this area, is that the big guys are certainly trying to become players in this area, but just because they have a solution doesn't mean they're going to give you the complete solution that you're looking for. So we found with the suite vendors, they're good at some things, but certainly not good at other pieces of what buyers are looking for. The good news here is that there's a lot of pure play vendors emerging. There's quite a few that we're covering in version 1 of our report, but we'll continue to add new vendors, and we're actively researching these guys as we speak. There's some really interesting innovation happening here that buyers are responding to. But as with any emerging marketplace, these guys tend to be a little bit more immature. And as this explodes, as this marketplace explodes, we expect changes to happen based on demands of their customers, as well as, I'm sure acquisitions will happen, as there's a lot of redundant services that are happening here. So buyer beware with this volatile space, but it's a fascinating one, and one that I think will gain more prominence as the time goes forward. Again, when it comes to CDPs, though, don't just put a feature-based evaluation criteria to selecting this type of technology. If you do that, you will find that there's very little difference from vendor to vendor. If you just put a checklist in front of them and say, can you do this feature? They can all do these features. However, it's how they accomplish these features that is most important to you. So instead, I want you to identify which scenarios, which use cases are you trying to solve. There's a big difference between B2B support use cases versus, e-commerce recommendations and optimizations, for example. So identify which scenarios are most important to you and use that to come up with your shortlist. Finally, let's talk about enterprise collaboration. One of the biggest themes that we've been following recently is the near collapse of Jive that is just causing a vacuum in many organizations, and it's causing a lot of pain in many organizations as they try to scramble to find a replacement. We've seen some vendors come back to life, and we've seen Facebook try to make some inroads into certainly the small business and medium-sized business, and in the retail space in particular, but this is an area that continues to evolve, and I think again, I go back to Office 365 is really making a push to be your collaboration tool, and that's coming with some mixed reaction. So this is an area not to take lightly, and certainly test these guys head to head as you go forward. And finally, to wrap up, let's come back to the map. This map is, like I said earlier, it's been a fun tool to talk about the different areas that we cover over the years. And but I do want to position a caution here at this point in this talk, because we always try to warn potential software buyers about placing too much reliance on single snapshot views of marketplaces, and that's what this is. This is a single snapshot view, our view of this world. We see people placing over reliance on quadrants and other graphical representations of where vendors might stack up. And this single snapshot view, this one size all approach at looking at marketplaces is a disservice to you as a buyer, because it doesn't tell you how these vendors are going to meet your needs. So instead, as I've hoped conveyed today, I want you to look at scenarios. I want you to understand what is most important to you as you try to make sense of which vendors are right for you. So I encourage you all to check out the Real Story Group Real Quadrant Shortlist Generator tool that we've created, and you can try it for free on our website. Go ahead and pick the scenarios that are most important to you, give them some weighting, and you can see how we map what is most important to you to the vendor's strengths that are out there, and so that we can save you some time doing your due diligence on the vendors that are fundamentally built to solve the challenges that you are trying to solve. So that's a big caution here, as I want this map to be a tool, but it's really just the starting point of your due diligence, and as quickly as you can make it as real as possible for your situation, the better off you're going to be in selecting the right partner. And then finally, once you get to the short list, your work isn't done. Don't just take our word for it. Don't just take other analyst firms' word for it. Don't just take your previous experience with these tools word for it. You really need to put these vendors through their paces to truly suss out how good of a fit they're going to be for your needs. You want to make sure they're a good technology fit, as well as value fit, as well as scenario fit, but also how good of a team fit is it for you? Is it, are the people behind it a good fit for your team? And that you shouldn't underestimate the importance of that as well. So put a process in place that you test these guys out at every stage of the way, so that you're you're certain that you're making the right choice in the end. And with that, we're just about out of time. I want to encourage you, if anyone has any questions about anything that we talked about today, please feel free to email us, at explore@realstorygroup.com, or email me directly at jjingras@realstorygroup.com, or give us a call. We have some phone numbers on here. I also encourage you to try out the Real Quadrant shortlist generator. Try out the real-time vendor comparison tool that you can see the different vendors head-to-head and compare them side by side. Or download a sample of the research. With each of those sublines that I showed you today, we have a free vendor evaluation chapter that we'll give you. And so check it out. You'll see the level of analysis that we've done, and I hope that resonates with you. And if there's anything we can do to help, please feel free to give us a call. Thank you all for your time today, and we'll see you next time.